there, it's Watchin, the founder and CEO of I Choose the Ladder and your favorite executive next door, and welcome to my channel where I teach ambitious Black women the unwritten rules of corporate America so that they can get as much from corporate America as they give to corporate America. In today's episode, we are going to talk about questions that you should be asking in job interviews. I know it can be really awkward, especially if you feel like you don't know as much as you want to know, or that everything that was important to you was covered in the conversation, or you get to the part of the conversation where the person says, so is there anything that you want to know, and you're kind of stuck, right? So if those things have ever happened to you, then this episode was created with you in mind. We're going to talk about different categories of questions to ask, the types of questions that matter, and then just help you get prepared so that you are never stuck when someone asks you during an interview if you have anything that you want to ask them. So what we have to remember, and if you take nothing else from this episode, what I want you to remember is the person who asks the questions controls the conversation, right? And this is true in any situation, not just interviews, but specifically in interviews. The person asking the questions is the person who's going to control where the conversation goes and what gets discussed. And so you want to make sure that you are balanced between giving information and also getting information from the person who is interviewing you. You want to make sure that the questions that you ask are also showing a level of competency that the position that you are applying for is going to require of you. So for example, if it is a strategy-based position, you want to ask questions that show that you're thinking about strategic types of things, that you're not thinking on a very surface and basic level about the job, right? If the job requires a level of creativity, you want to show that you're asking questions around creative solutions about things or the creative process, right? So without directly saying, hey, I can do this level of thinking or I can do this level of work, you are showing through your conversation that you already have that skill set. You want your questions to show that you're actually interested in that role in that company. A lot of times we end up having a bunch of like blanket questions that we ask everywhere, and interviewers can tell that because they've interviewed a bunch of people. So if you come in and you are asking the same kinds of questions that everyone else is, it's going to be really hard to set you apart from the hundreds of other people who may be applying for that job, right? So this is why I say, and I realize that I'm saying this from a position of privilege, that the spray and pray approach to looking for a new job is hardly ever effective, because you cannot prepare at the level that's required to set you apart if you will have like 50 interviews, because the amount of time that's going to take to research 50 companies to be able to ask the questions that you need to ask to set yourself apart is going to be really hard. And so think about the roles that you really want to go after that align with the skill set that you have and an idea of how you want to be spending your time. And those are the companies that I would suggest you go after. The last thing that I will say about questions, and this is really important, right? You want to make sure that your questions are open-ended and that they give you an opportunity for two things. Either the opportunity for continued conversation or an opportunity for you to ask follow-up questions, right? Again, the person asking the questions controls the flow of the conversation, and you want it to be, you want your interviews to feel like people are getting to know you, right? Because people want to work with people that they know and they like. And the types of questions that you ask, if they are open-ended, allow for a back and forth dialogue that yes or no questions simply just can't. So what kinds of areas should you be asking questions in, right? And I answered that pretty simply. You need to ask questions about the areas that matter to you. There are going to be things that are important to you that may not be important to the next candidate, but you want to know the answers to those questions up front so that you can decide if the position is a right fit for you, not just on paper, but in the practical application of what the day-to-day of working in that role will be. So some common areas that you can ask questions around. So training and development. If your professional growth is something that's important to you, you want to know how that company looks at and strategizes around training and development. For Black people, diversity and inclusion strategies and priorities, right? A lot of companies are just starting to get their D&I strategies wheels in motion, right? But if they can show that they are starting to put some thought through it, or that they have some action behind things, that may help inform your decision on if you want to work there or not. Another thing you can ask about, another area, is the core responsibilities of the job, right? We all know that what's on paper and in that job description 9 times out of 10 is not exactly what you're going to be doing when you are on the job. So you want to ask detailed questions about the core job responsibilities. You want to ask questions about your performance, right? How is your performance going to be measured when you are in the role, right? What does success look like? And we talk about this all the time. You need to be clear on how you're going to be measured, because then it helps you decide what you prioritize. You can ask questions about the person that you're interviewing with, right? Especially if that person is going to manage you, or if that person has been managed by the person who's going to be managing you. You want to know if you're going to be able to work well with them, right? And so asking them some questions, like not nosy questions, right? Like don't be intrusive, but you want to get to know them, about their management styles. And we'll talk more about specific questions later, but you definitely want to ask the person interviewing you questions about themselves. A few more things: you want to ask questions about the company and not things that you find on the website, right? Like if you can find it on the website, you could just read it, right? You should have done your research. So you can ask questions about the company. You can ask questions about the team, right? The people who you'll be working with. We spend more time at work, well, in pre-COVID times, at work than anywhere else. And so you want to know about the team that you're going to be working with, how they work, the hierarchies, and like all of those types of things you want to know ahead of time. You definitely want to know about the company culture as well as your team culture, right? And to make sure that your working style fits in with their company culture. And I think the last thing that we often forget to do is next steps, right? So you go to an interview, you don't ask what the next steps are, and then you torture yourself for another 2 weeks because you haven't heard back, but not knowing you were the first person in the first round. So it's more like 4 weeks before you would hear back. So never leave without having some questions around what the next steps are. And so now we'll talk about some specific questions that you can ask to help get your brain kind of rolling as you think through what questions you want to ask in your next interview. So this one is one of my favorites because it helps you understand if they actually have a vision for your role. So the first question that I would ask is, how is the success of the person who gets this role going to be measured? If they can't tell you that, you're gonna come in and you're gonna be doing a lot of things, right? And it's going to be overwhelming because there's not a clear vision of what that role is supposed to be accomplishing. For a lot of the more senior roles, they will have, job descriptions and a few metrics, and they don't have to have it well thought out or very detailed, but there needs to be some level of a benchmark that you're going to be measuring yourself against as you come into the role, because unmet expectations are usually where things go wrong. And so you want to have a clear understanding if what they're measuring you on is actually something that you can deliver on. So how is the success of the person who gets the role going to be measured? And again, I didn't say how am I going to be measured if I get the role, because to me that's a little presumptuous. So the person who gets the role. Right? Second question, is there a specific skill set that you think makes a difference in someone's ability to perform in this role, right? So if they say that a skill set that makes a difference is someone's ability to quickly build relationships, and you know that is not something that you're good at, that should be a red flag for you. Doesn't mean don't accept the job, doesn't mean it isn't something that you can grow, but it does mean that it should raise your antenna to be like, if that is a core part of what makes this person successful, and it's not something that I do or want to do, should I dig deeper, right? Should I ask more follow-up questions? Definitely ask about skill sets. Do you expect the primary responsibilities for this position to change within the next 6 months to a year? There's nothing worse than feeling like you've been bait and switched, right? So you sign up for this one job, you get there 3 months later, you're doing something totally different, and it's like, but wait though, this is not what I signed up for. Not that you're inflexible, not that you don't want to do the work, it's just that that's not what you signed up for. So you want to make sure up front that if there are changes that are on the horizon that they already know about, that they can share with you, and you can decide, one, if you have the ability to help see those changes through, and two, do you want to do those things that the changes are going to bring on, right? Again, a job interview is a two-way street. No one's doing you a favor by hiring you. You're not doing anybody a favor by being hired by you. You guys are exchanging resources. And so you want to make sure that the resources that you have and the resources that they have are aligned. One of the things that I talked about in the beginning was around training and development, if it's important to you, right? So a question that you can ask is, what training programs are available to your employees, right? Is it just tuition reimbursement, or are there, does your manager have budgets for ongoing professional development for their staff, right? You want to know those things, especially if you don't plan to go back to school full time, but there are workshops that you want to take, or there are conferences that you want to attend. If there is a level that you have to be at in order to qualify for those things, you want to know that ahead of time. What are the performance expectations of this position over the first 12 months, right? You want to make sure that they don't have unrealistic expectations. I know for some people who work in sales, you get there and your goal is out of this world. And it's like, but bruh, I'm just ramping up. How can I hit these numbers? And so you want to know ahead of time what the expectations around your performance will be in the first, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. You want to know that ahead of time. As you talk to the person, right? It's what's something that has surprised you about working in this like department or in this company? Because a lot of times we go in thinking that we know what it's going to be like to do the job. And then once we've been there for a while, there are some things where you're like, I didn't know this, right? So that could probably help you think through how to manage your own expectations as you go through the interview process, accept the job, hopefully, and then start working within that. And what I will say to wrap us up is that questions are really important. I think that we don't make good use of the time that we have when people ask like, do you have any questions, right? It's like you want to quickly get out of your suit. You want to quickly get back into your sweatpants. You want to quickly get out of this interview so that you don't say anything wrong, right? Like, all right, I think I did my best. I don't want to talk myself out of an offer, but make sure that you are using that time to ask really good questions that can help you make an informed decision about whether you want to take that job or not. All right, y'all, I know that there are tons of questions that you could be asking. So if there is a question that you've asked in an interview where the interviewer was like, hey, that's a really good question, drop it in the comments so that we can start asking those on our next job interviews. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram at I Choose the Ladder, on Facebook at I Choose the Ladder, and also on LinkedIn at I Choose the Ladder. And until next time, bye.